Unguiding today, let's take just 3 minutes and you do the practice that you are familiar with. I want you to be very clear on what you're doing and only rely on the field that's created between us for some support. We're melting into the space together. Let's take 3 minutes. Take a few more seconds to bring it to a close. And in the context of the chapter we're going to read today, we're going to go over today, second part of the we're all just walking each other to the same home. I want you to reflect on your practice in the context of taking on a skillful view. What does it mean to meditate? What does it mean to take on a set of instructions originating from words, from a teacher, or from a book, then using that to change your mind? This is really the essence of this chapter, where if in the previous one we were discussing the way that genes that we are wearing or fixed intentions, we can see both as the reified form, but also from the perspective of the constituent bits. Here in this one, I want us more to explore the way that when we install an intention, or put on genes, it filters the sensory bits coming in. It conditions them. conditioning being the word that's most widely used by Buddhists to describe karma, to describe the way that our views of the self, but any other views condition our experience, and then the way that there are these loops of conditioning that we lose ourselves in, aka ignorance. And every time we take on a view, whether a meditative view, a skillful view, or any other, there's first of all, and pull up my summary. So I like the words there. The initial thing that we're doing is deciding how we want to relate to reality, to ongoing experience. So whether we say something like, look at the bird, and before we even turn our gaze, we have a shape of a bird that we're trying to match, or we're saying, look at your experience with eyes of gratitude, there's a way that we are choosing consciously to filter reality, to filter ongoing experience through that lens. And generally, we have in mind, in particular, some result that we're looking towards, whether it's seeing a bird or having a grateful attitude towards what arises, or even just feeling good as a result of having gratitude towards what arises. And then there are all sorts of assumptions that are underlying the filter, where, for example, we could say, if the filter is gratitude and the result is I want to feel good, there's the underlying assumption also of feeling good is good, or feeling good will help me on the path, or I want to feel good all the time. And so in the course of this practice, and this is something we discussed quite a bit, we want to make all of those assumptions conscious. Because any assumption that's not conscious, any conditioning that we're not aware of, is going to be in control in an unconscious way, and generally lead us to a continuation of ignorance and of samsaric spinning, which is the subject of the chapter, 2 chapters down. Now I more so want to explore this notion of installing a filter in this way. And this claim that I'm making, that all meditation is about cheap views. It's not exactly a claim, it's more so a definition. But I really want us to be clear, particularly on the 3 points that I mentioned. That we're choosing how to look, equivalent to putting on the jeans. That we have a particular goal, some result in mind, right? I want to wear jeans because I want to go to a party. And that there are all sorts of assumptions, both about what the jeans will let me do, and underlying assumptions, normally that we're unconscious of, about what the results are good for, why I'm supposed to wear the jeans, and so on. Any questions about this so far before we continue? Any basis of operation of the type that we discussed recently, with their progressive expandedness and dissolution of entrenched assumptions about reality, are also views. And sometimes, as instruction, when the teacher gives you a pointing out towards a particular basis of operation, they would also say, take the view that, or continue holding the view even after receiving the instructions, even after getting off the cushion. Because again, this view, and especially at the beginning, as we learn to exercise it, we learn its ins and outs, we learn to recognize it, and ultimately, before it becomes completely automatic, it's something that we have to fabricate, something that we have to put an effort towards. In the same way that when we do a type of mind collectedness practice, we have some locus for attention that we want to continually direct attention to. The views of the basis of operation are also ones where we inflect the mind a certain way, or we make some type of inquiry about our experience that opens it up and continue, and we want to continue being in that space, that filter that we're taking on opens up. So no questions about this. Let's continue and touch on other important things for today.
Dora, just a quick question. You mentioned the 3 points about the way that all meditation is about views, and you mentioned 3 points, yes? About how you want to relate to reality.
Yeah.
About our goals or results, and the assumption underneath that. First point is just only consciously, and not unconsciously and consciously as the others.
Sorry, say the last thing again. The last sentence.
The first point you just point out that it's our conscience. Yes.
I'm saying it can either be conscious or unconscious.
Yeah, that's the question. Why? I mean, I would assume that they are conscious and unconscious as well. But you also only mentioned conscience.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Talking about the first one, like why is the first point only consciously and not consciously and unconsciously?
So when we meditate, we do something consciously. Of course, throughout our lives, throughout our days, we are entangled in a deep, vexing web of unconscious decisions about how we want to view life. This is specifically in the context of meditation, but of course, we're always unconsciously deciding what filters we want to have on.
Okay.
Okay, so we're installing particular ways of looking that we have an assumption are beneficial. And of course, in meditation and many other things, but particularly in meditation, initially we have to trust that we're going to be taken somewhere that's useful for us. A beautiful thing about Buddhism that's worth mentioning, and the way that really teases it out from anything else that could be called a philosophy or religion or a method, is that Buddhism has this assumption that if you try to look through the lens, you will see for yourself. The Buddha always said, "Ai pasiko," just come and see for yourself. Versus other traditions, other philosophies, religions, wisdoms, where you're supposed to take a view, but then to really be part of the religion, really take it on, you also have to be convinced of the supposed results of the view, which are themselves another view. It's like if you give yourself to, oh, you know what, I don't want to start being offensive, but I'm sure your mind can travel to those locations yourself, where some religion tells you you have to be this way and you have to believe this thing and you have to see things a particular way. Versus if you take on this view, you will notice that this is happening in your experience, and you can decide for yourself if it's desirable or not. You can decide for yourself if this path is making you more conscious, have more choice, appreciate your experience more and more, or not. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that I like here. This is a really good chapter, but I'm not going to go over it all for our summary. This is important to mention. Abiding in the highest basis in fundamental consciousness is inversely proportional to how much we have attached views. Normally, these are unconscious views, but even as they come to consciousness, even as they come to conscious awareness, often we can still be attached to them because we don't yet have the technology to resolve the attachment. And that's because we have some underlying karma, some underlying pain that's not been processed, or because we don't have the type of growing up, relational or mature technology for how to create a better construct that doesn't have to attach as much. And in this chapter, I'm also making a critique of the path of Jhana. It's very prevalent these days. If we're only using them from a perspective, that's often sort of a mistaken interpretation of the suttas, or the first turning of the wheel, which is you are doing the jhanas so that in the future you will become enlightened, so that something happens after you sit for a while. There's an exploration here that I want to point out, which is anytime you assume that you have to meditate so that in a concept of a future, there is going to be some you that then acquires or becomes some attainment. This is all wrapped up in views. There are assumptions of self, there are assumptions of time, there are assumptions of becoming. And immediately we are taken out on a ride that's built on top of the types of assumptions that in the path that we've been describing, we are attempting to unravel, to peel off in terms of the layers that are obscuring fundamental consciousness. Does that make sense? Any questions about this?
I might have a question about unmediated awareness. There's something that's not clear to me. So the way I understand it is that unmediated awareness is when there is no mediator, so sort of like no how do I put it?
Coordinators or subminds?
Yeah, so like no submind or coordinator that is kind of constantly in control, and it's also distinct from conscious awareness in that all those layers are kind of seen through, and you can see fundamental consciousness. Is that kind of correct understanding, or?
Yeah, if you're based in fundamental consciousness, and we're also going to talk next about a partial basing, then any coordinator arising in this and in this language that we're using today, any view that is arising, any attempt at placing a filter before perception is seen as it arises and as empty, without having some inherent meaning that we then get applied in an entrenched way in the back of perception.
Yeah, so but that's the highest base. But what about the unmediated awareness base?
So any basis is partially mediated until we get to fundamental consciousness. And that corresponds to the effort that we're making to install a higher basis.
Mm-hmm.
When I say unmediated awareness, and in the context of the pyramid, like the levels of mind that we were talking about 2 weeks ago, every sub basis in unmediated awareness is removing a layer of mediation, or making visible, unless completely opaque, a layer of mediation. So we're talking about being not unmediated by a reified narrative of a self, and then unmediated by thought, unmediated by time and space.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, okay. So that's like transition from conscious awareness to unmediated in removing those layers.
Yeah. In some sense, conscious awareness is just a way for all of the coordinators to communicate better, to collaborate on creating an awareness that's wider, where all the participants are aware of the information that's happening, rather than being slaved into the paradigm. In unmediated awareness, every step is taking away an assumption that one or more coordinators are building on to do their act of perception and action. So at the end of if we have a pyramid of perception, where at the base layer or non-layer is fundamental consciousness, the peak and most contracted is unconscious awareness. When we have better collaboration, we have conscious awareness. And then the conscious awareness, those coordinators are founded on assumptions that are lower in the pyramid and are unconscious. And as we make every layer conscious and we see through it, the coordinators that were previously relying on those entrenched assumptions can't reform in a way that's blind and entrenched again. We're taking off layers of mediation and assumptions. Some coordinators, their way of showing up in a way that leads to even unconscious awareness, or that generally are unconscious in their assumptions, rely on other lower strata that are unconscious. Let me try to say this more clearly. If the foundational Lego pieces that a coordinator uses, pulls together in an attempt to craft a view, are unconscious, it's much more likely that the end result will be unconscious.
Yeah. So I suppose my main confusion is about the term unmediated, because like, so if fundamental consciousness is when, sorry, I'm still a little bit like, the terminology is a bit like, doesn't come quite naturally at this point, but if in fundamental consciousness, if one is abiding in that basis, it seems like that's when awareness is unmediated.
Unmediation. That's right.
Huh?
That would be the full, in some sense, fundamental consciousness is like the completion of the unmediated awareness basis.
Yeah. So in that case, what is unmediated awareness? Like, what is unmediated there in that awareness?
So at the beginning, we become less mediated by a narrative of self, like the
Okay.
experiment that we did 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then we become less mediated by time, which is the experiment that we ran
Mhm.
last week, right?
Right.
And as we learn, and of course, right now, I'm assuming all of us are more stuck in time, so to speak, than when we were making the effort to start seeing through the assumption of time. Correct? And so
Yeah.
this is the type of skillful activity or skillful view taking that allows us to slowly dissolve all of the mediation, all of the ways that consciousness is bound by those assumptions, all the way until fundamental consciousness, until there are no entrenched assumptions.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like in between degree of like there is some mediation, but we're
Right.
loosening that as we go. So that's the meaning.
This is why I like analogies of glasses or multiple glasses or multiple layers of jeans, right?
Yeah.
Every layer of jeans that you take off gives you more flexibility, gives you more degrees of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You know how sometimes if you've worn tight jeans for a while and you take them off at night and you're naked for a while, like suddenly there's like this some energy that comes up if you move around a little bit. It's like, oh, like stretching it out, not without even doing something specific. It's just like the joy of being free, right? Like you that sort of thing. So imagine that, but in every layer of your being. Right now, there's a way that every cell, every tissue, every blood vessel, every muscle, every connective tissue is tightened, not because we're wearing a piece of clothing, but because we are wearing filters upon filters of perception and action. This is partially the point that I was trying to make in the coordinators chapter, which is the act of coordination, even if it's not super active right now, even if I'm not telling you, look at the bird right now, and you're looking, the fact that it's conditioning the mind, that it's always there, sort of running on neutral, means that there's a part of us that's like just almost ready to look at the bird. Right? It's like it's always stuck. And then if I want to tell you something else, like no, don't just look at the bird now also, but don't forget to also continue driving. You're also doing something like this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
A continuous collection of all of the intentions that are fixed in the background of the mind.
Yeah.
And the way to take them off is through pointing out those assumptions.
Right. And so the more you do that, the more unmediated awareness becomes, ultimately dissolving completely to fundamental consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And I am not a giant fan of the word unmediated, because as we loosen those assumptions, there's still some mediation.
Yeah,
If
that's
it
what
isn't the
was.
assumption in itself,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why sometimes I like saying unbound, but it's a territory where words don't do a great job, especially if it's two words. Like you really have to explain the whole thesis for that to be seen. There's no word that I've come up with which is satisfying. And in later sections, I also want to discuss all of the bases in other terms that are relevant for the lens that we're using in an attempt to, we're sort of like the blind man and the elephant. It's like, it's kind of rough here, and then this is smooth, right? Like ultimately, hopefully you get, oh, it's an elephant. Now I know how to practice. So great questions. Like this is really like you're penetrating the types of nuances that are needed to get a good intellectual understanding of this. So thank you for those questions.
Yeah, it was just like I read a little bit ahead, a few chapters ahead of the one that we're talking about right now, and so like this came up because it was just like a bit unclear, but now you clarified it, so thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. So this leads us directly to, sorry, before we go there, any questions about this notion of the way that most people practice jhanas, such that with this thesis, they're essentially spinning in place, or they're stuck in a view that they're not conscious of? Does it make sense?
Yes, I do have a question about it, however.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, even in our practice, we like hold certain top-down views because we consider them to be more skillful and approximating like views that will come up naturally at a point.
Yeah.
So the views that are, or the assumptions that are embedded in this practice of jhana, are they not also skillful views in that way?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
the problem is not being conscious of them, or?
Yes. So there is a problem, or let's say less skillful means in the instructions, in how that path is described. And then there's an issue with students taking on those assumptions and not questioning them ever again, especially because they come from an authority. And because those assumptions also correspond to the existing conditioning that they have, which is something is flawed with me, there's some original sin, I'm not doing this right, I have to make an effort so that in the future I can be better in some way. And then the conditioning that otherwise you could directly observe in terms of something is wrong with me, there's some agitation that implies I need to do something other than being with the agitation, becomes the foundation for the meditation, becomes the foundation of the pyramid from which you are meditating, and it can become an escape from what would otherwise liberate you. So jhanas in themselves, or just like the practices that I provide in the practice book, are a tool. The question is, what is the context in which they are taught and practiced? If you learn in the context of the path of Mahamudra, as I was describing in the mental yoga part, where you take on skillful genes, right? Just to get you to a certain place. And that the whole point of the path is to take those skillful views, those skillful genes, take those mental yoga poses, so that in each consecutive move, you can relax more fundamental assumptions. Then you're using a view that is in some sense self-correcting. Even if you find yourself attached to a particular exercise, to a particular practice, like many people do in jhana practice, because they can become blissful and very peaceful and so on, at least you have the originating instruction. Wait, I'm only doing it to get to the point where I don't have to make any more effort. I don't have to be in a particular state to be free. Because the point is to let go of all conditioning. Versus if you're told you have to climb the jhanas on the cushion and then get to cessation, and then maybe somehow some magic happens and you wake up. It can look subtle, and of course throughout the jhanas there's also a deconstruction that happens in terms of assumptions, but the way that it's framed tends to leave people in an assumptions of this is what needs to happen so that I, in a concept of a future, become a concept of liberated.
I see. So there's always that last filter, that waiting for the thing, like trademark to happen.
Yeah.
And I see. Thank you.
Hasn't happened, maybe more effort or more retreats or more meditation. Whereas the pointing out instructions all the way down look very much like what we were doing in the last few weeks. It's just like, notice this. Check out the assumptions that you're coming in with, right? Also inquiries that we've done. What are the genes that I'm wearing right now? What is the meaning making that I'm making about how I have to be right now? It's a direct exploration that cuts through the deeper and deeper layers of the pyramid. All right, so moving on, there's then what I'm calling the partial awakening of Vajrayana. And I guess I shouldn't say I'm calling. It is a thing that's described in many texts where there are analogies of, for example, the way that if fundamental consciousness is like imagine an A4 white page. There's the ground of being, the thing that exists, that or the thing. Then let's not use the word exists. The process that underlies the coordinators then coming up and reflecting on it. The process that underlies the act of awareness that comes into being through the dance of coordinators, interpreting reality in terms of themselves, pulling back to the first chapter that we were discussing, which is what's awareness. So from fundamental consciousness, there is formed another layer of awareness, which then translates incoming sensory bits, incoming reality in terms of the awareness, in terms of this collection of coordinators and their assumptions. You with me so far? Seeing confused looks. Let me try and use some aids. Let's see. So I have a layer of awareness with all of its assumptions and so on, and it's continuously reflecting reality being the bottom phone. What we're doing in the process of dissolving the assumptions of awareness is slowly exposing. Actually, I have two identical phones. I'm just switching between them. We're slowly taking away assumptions so that we reveal, this is my smaller phone, we reveal more and more of fundamental consciousness, right? Because it's not mediated by awareness. So rather than hoping that it just poof goes away and leaves us with fundamental consciousness, we're slowly creating more refined awareness, reflecting fundamental consciousness, right? There's more and more and more and more. It's like we're slowly peeling off a layer that we're putting on top of reality, which is compulsively there and filtering it until, oh, this is so nice. This is my background screen. The Dokchen until we can just abide as the thing that doesn't have any layer of awareness on top of it. So in the first turning, the assumption was meditate a bunch or do whatever practice. And then at some point, just goes away. You see the insight into Nibbana, into the true nature. And then you see how anything trying to construct itself is doing it in the moment, and you don't allow it to have any hold. what the Vajrayana process does, and again, through exactly the types of steps that we were describing, is you start dissolving this or cutting off bits of it, and you're left with an awareness that's more and more expanded, less and less contracted, which corresponds to how much you've exposed of fundamental consciousness and allowed it to be then expressed in acts of coordination, but without them obscuring fundamental consciousness. They arise in a way that's so aligned with it that they're no longer covering it, covering the radiance of it, covering the brightness and the continuous recognition of fundamental consciousness. So we have a partial, ever increasing awakening. And there is a prize at the end. When you can completely take this off, there is a qualitative change. But up until the point that this happens, and I urge everyone to read that section. I won't try to recreate it now. The text in itself is a sort of pointing out. There is still an awakeness. There is still fundamental consciousness that we're in contact with. This is the thing that becomes unmediated in terms of us being able to perceive it directly in the process of going deeper and deeper into unmediated awareness. Again, I want to use the disclaimer that this is a lot to take in just intellectually. It works much better when it goes hand in hand with the experiential understanding. So try to, at least in terms of memory, bring to mind the types of experiences that we had last time. Linus, you were speaking about a sense of being in some eternal moment. You said infinity. So there's less and less of what would otherwise pull us into organizing information coming in terms of past and future in a way that's compulsive. And it can feel like this flattening of time. And that's not to say that then you cannot have past and future. It's just that they arise without obscuring fundamental consciousness and therefore not mediating it completely, not mediating it unconsciously. How's this land?
So we are conscious of this gradual discovery of the fundamental consciousness all the time, or is it sometimes unconscious?
Yeah. In the non-dual Shaiva Tantra tradition, the one that originated and persisted in the Kashmir region of India for hundreds of years, there was a kingdom that was actually founded on this as their philosophy of living, as their tradition, as their religion. They originated, and I'll say it's the closest thing to Tibetan Buddhism. It's almost identical in some of its assumptions. I think that the technology of Tibetan Buddhists is superior, but it's so parallel. A lot of how they were conceiving of the path was in terms of recognition, and there are the recognition sutras. And in there, when they speak of Shiva and Shakti, it is just deification or attempting to create a beautiful pointer to the same thing we're calling fundamental consciousness, where Shiva is consciousness. Shiva is the everything. Shiva is the underlying reality, so to speak. And then Shakti is its expression. Shakti is the act of coordination. It is this dance of collaborating on perceiving and acting. And when Shiva and Shakti fully know each other, there's also a melding. And then we lose a distinction between the thing that's in the ground, like fundamental consciousness, and the thing that's dancing, or the act of coordination. Where and that also requires this eventual pulling off of this notion that there's something here that is seeing this that's separate from it. If these are Shiva and Shakti, we get to their union by taking off the obscuration, by taking off acts of coordination that are not aligned with the ground. So in full alignment, it would be the equivalent of taking this off or having a complete meld. This level, the words are not that important. Also not great at describing this, but they are pointing in a similar direction. So I was saying all of this to say at a particular stage of pointing out, then the pointer can just be recognize Shiva, recognize the Shiva Shakti nature of existence. Sometimes the Shaivists, right, non-dual Shaiva Tantra, Shaiva from Shiva, sometimes they even just tell you recognize, and sing you towards it. And that can be enough, right? There's something beautiful about the Mahamudra path, which is just like takes off saddle layer after saddle layer. It's like with almost medical precision. Sometimes it really is just recognize. And this is where also many, not just in that tradition, the Shaiva tradition, but in many other traditions, there's praying to God or just trying to invoke the presence of God. It's all pointing to the same thing, right? Because of course, this fundamental consciousness is always there, always here now. It's just that it's obscured by layers and layers of mediation. But sometimes if enough people come through and if they have at least some practice, some inclination towards it, it's enough to all sing a song of praise and recognition to God, and people can wake up. These have the partial waking up or have like a major hole in the web of coordination be opened. So we open and open and open and open, and that requires some effort, right? We have this continuous pulsation, but sometimes we start catching on, and opening becomes the new stable attractor, the new basis of operation that's now effortless. And then it lets us increase the aperture more and more and more and more. And it becomes this big, more and more and more. And then at some point we lose all effort, and it can still contract. But now when it expands, it's just it. Doesn't require any more effort, even as things still contract, even as conditioning still exists. Right? And then the conditioning continues doing this a few more times.
So you say that we are doing this consciously. We're seeing the whole feeling that it grows. So it doesn't happen just by we are doing an effort and somewhere there's something grows, but we actually aware of this happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're not directly aware of it. It's more like seeing the, well, in the context of levels of mind, we see that the mind is more collected. We see that we are less attached, both psychologically in the sense of like the freedom that we see that we can have, and in terms of how the body feels, how contracted it is. And then the degree of wisdom that's embedded in us, right? Which is, first of all, the wisdom of emptiness. We start seeing through assumptions more and more and see that they're not inherently meaningful. And in terms of how we organize our internal life, how much of it is naturally loving, compassionate, attempting towards collaboration and non-zero sumness, versus invalidating, versus trying to push arising phenomena away. There's a chapter, one of my favorite chapters in the next section of the book, in the next part of the book, it's the invalidation all the way down. Because the nature of a view is that it locks on to some preconditioned pattern of reality, trying to slot everything in it, anything that appears to be outside gets pushed away, gets invalidated. It's not this. This is not supposed to happen. This is not supposed to come up. Like, I don't want to hear this even. Oh, it's just some method of suppression, which is what's called the hindrances. The 5 hindrances are those strategies for pushing away stuff that doesn't fit in the layers of boxes, right? In the layers of conditioning. When there's no conditions, when we get to a foundationless psyche, then there's nothing that comes up that will be invalidated, because there's nothing to invalidate it. There's nothing that will say it's not supposed to be this way. It can still happen in the sense that even from fundamental consciousness, if I want to look at a bird, it's like, oh, bird. And I'm sort of mounting the essence of what I know a bird is, right? We're going to talk about this in information theory parts, about how do we create those statistical models. Sort of mount this pattern of a bird, and I try to fit bird. And so other things that are not bird are in the moment sort of being like, not now. But we're doing it as a choice. It's not a compulsive thing. And the thing that arises in that ground of a choice of mounting a pattern also doesn't get as frustrated as the bits of our mind that have been suppressed for decades and come up again and again and just get slapped down, right? So even the things that come up in the moment, this is more of a relational description, the type that will be explored in the socioeconomic section. It comes up and it's like, oh, you're watching birds? Okay, cool, I'll come back later, right? It's not this act of no, and all the tension that's created in the battleground of no. Great, so now we've described the whole path, and so from so many perspectives.
May I ask another question about this?
Of course.
What comes up, the question that comes up in me for this is, how can I be sure that I'm not lying to myself and just, trying to see what you described and say, wow, it works.
So, my friend, this is perhaps the most important question in terms of the practical path, because due to our conditioning, we want so much to be at the higher stage. We want so much to get to the place where we can be like, I've arrived. Now I can rest. And it requires immense continuous dedication and sincerity to be like, oh, yesterday I was at a higher basis, but I think I'm not there anymore. And like really sit with it and see, okay, what are the conditions? What do I know are the characteristics of this basis? It's like, oh yeah, I think I'm at the lower basis. Okay, what do I do now? Do I need to go on the question? Okay, let's see. Let me try to apply the effort. Can I make it and jump to the next one with effort? Okay, let's do it. Okay, I made it. Okay, is it stable? Can I let go of the effort? And then you spend a few minutes or a few hours, and it's like, no, I have to make effort to continue being here. And you make the effort. And then you spend a few more hours, and you're like, oh, with the effort, is this stable? Can I be here? If yes, great. You continue with the effort until it stabilizes. If not, you can go on the cushion and do it in conditions that are more permissive of making this climb. And of course, any time where you have uncertainty, you speak to a teacher. Or hopefully, and this is the type of project that I'm undertaking, which as far as I know has not been done for many useful reasons that I just discussed on a podcast that I went on yesterday with Wisdom of Natural Awakenings. I'm going to just refer to that and leave that aside for now. To put this path in text. So you have a text reference to consult with, maybe also with videos, because normally this path is secret. It's only done through direct transmission, heart to heart, the type of pointing out instructions that I've been giving. There are parts of this path that are only pointed out in private. That are not recorded and are only given to students when the teacher thinks that they're ready. And I want to see if we can. And again, I'm leaving the arguments for the podcast to see if we can do that now with the tools that we have available. So yeah, that's again, it's a great question. In some sense, that's the whole of the path. How do I identify correctly where I'm at, and how do I activate? How do I put my effort towards the correct next move, towards the skillful next move? It's all of it. Any more questions before we go into inquiry? Also about things that are in the chapter that we haven't talked about. There's like maybe 40% of the chapter are related notions and other items that glue it all together. I mean, how this whole thing sits with you.
So I'm still thinking of you moving the phones away from each other or toward each other.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, do you think the state of awakening is like asymptotic? Like you said, there's a, yes, okay. All right. And then in meditation, there's better conditions and you can get like closer, and that makes it easier to be closer even in daily life.
Yeah.
Because like there's special states in meditation, right? States you cannot, I mean, you can, meditation is also part of life, but you cannot exactly reach in every moment of your day. And so I feel like in meditation, you get closer and then you move away, but not as far away as where you started before the meditation.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And then with the help of the continuous identifying where you are and making an honest effort, you can maintain, you can sort of glide on the results of the meditation, or even increase the baseline, depending on the causes and conditions, depending on your discipline, depending on how resolute you are in your decision to prioritize holding the basis of operation over the activity that you're engaging in the world. Right? So this capacity to continually practicing, continually taking the Dharma, this Dharmic vehicle, more and more as the priority, as the underlying intention, makes it so meditation becomes maybe a bump, but stops being necessary because you're continually on an upward moving trend. You continually, sorry for the dumb analogy, but continually doing this, right? This is like the equivalent of the open, close, expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. And even people who are Buddhas, right, who have taken off all conditioning, or as you say, asymptotically have taken off all conditioning, from time to time, one of my teachers says, in the last 2 years, I spent 3 seconds being triggered. And the triggered is exactly this moment. It's like, right? And maybe he's done, or maybe he just has not spent time in the types of conditions that would make another few seconds of like, right? Maybe there's something so deep in his psyche somehow that he's not found, right? The quintessential dinner with his mother-in-law that's gonna keep him as a samsaric being again for like a whole evening. Who knows, right? All you can know is at some point it's just like, oh, cool, I don't have to do the samsara thing anymore. Oh, cool, I'm not doing it. It's a samsara, like the thought, but you clearly recognize that you're not doing it anymore.
Still, are we moving on with the chapter, or are we doing like something more practice oriented? Because I still have a question like about the chapter, but
Yeah,
let's
please.
see if it comes up.
We have some
Okay.
inquiries, juicy inquiries, but yeah, there's more time.
All right. Thank you. You said last time that sometimes attachments will go kind of hide behind other attachments. Like as we let go of more and more of them, they will tend to kind of cluster together. And in this chapter, you wrote, like I think in a note towards the end, maybe, that collecting the mind can also like even increase the resistance against deep-sitting traumas. and so on, because like the collected mind is more powerful, right?
Right.
And then I thought that seems important, like a very important point on this path, because I feel like that's something we really want to avoid. And I wanted to ask, like, if even this, in Buddhism, there's always this paradoxical desire for reaching some state that we talked about with the jhanas.
Yeah.
And yeah, is that also an attachment, like where the other attachments go to hide? And
Yes.
is there a particular thing we try to avoid, or try to do to avoid like collecting the mind and that kind of moving against one particular part or one particular coordinator then?
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I hope that question makes sense.
Yes. You can think about attachments, about fixed intentions, as like prions, or like malformed proteins that begin aggregating, or I guess a less nerdy analogy would be you have something stuck in a pipe, right, or in a blood vessel, and the seed of the gunk, right, that's stuck, is gonna make it much easier for any piece of gunk to get stuck to the piece of gunk that's already there, and the more it grows, right? Same with attachment. Anything that's attached will start grabbing any information coming through and lead to more attachment. And it grows and it grows and it grows. It's this constant process initially of slowing down the growing, right? The accumulation of karmic traces. Then you get to some steady state, and then you start breaking it down until the blood vessels, until the sewer pipes are all clean again. And then there was another aspect to what you were asking, which was about practice. Yeah. So this is why, I want to make sure we're not like trashing the first turning or something like that. When done from skillful perspective, it can be very useful, especially for a certain subset of practitioners that for whom this would be a better path, right? Like a lot of the science that's being done these days around meditation and consciousness evolution is in identifying what practices, what instructions, what approaches, what attitudes fit for every type of mind, for every type of person, and their particular quirks, particular conditioning, particular compensation mechanisms. And often, when taught right, the teaching is go into jhana and then investigate the jhana, or get out of the jhana completely and then do vipassana practice. Which at least it goes sort of halfway towards you're constructing, and then you're using the sharpened mind to look down on itself, right? And I think it's still good if you construct and you have the underlying view of I'm constructing so that I have an easier time letting go versus I'm constructing so that I have a very sharp tool with which to do this, right? In some sense, this is the first turning, second turning approach. You create a powerful mind that serves as the antidote for all of the conditioning, all of the issues, versus the Vajrayana approach, which is I'm going to expand so much that it's almost like the conditioning, the agglomeration, right, the gunk, because we were creating such a state of lowered pressure, almost going towards vacuum, it's just going to start dissolve, going to start evaporate by itself. I'm not gonna need to do something about it, because the doing is reification of a doer and gunk, and we start poking them, and it's more samsaric activity. And again, it's useful to a certain degree, but to be fully free, it's more like going towards states of more and more vacuum, less and less pressure, then allows the conditioning to self-evaporate, what's called self-arising, self-liberating. Well, my favorite Tibetan term, wrong nong, wrong roll. This is the first and last time I will ever say a Tibetan phrase, maybe. Wrong nong, wrong roll. How do they say this? self-arising, self-liberating, creating the vacuous conditions in which the tight solids can start naturally evaporating. Right? You guys know how the lower the pressure, the quicker water evaporates. Right? Of course, depending on the humidity and the carrying capacity of the air, but like water in space are just gonna. But if the atmosphere is really dense, it's gonna be a very slow process, if at all. So we are de-densifying the mind, letting things. Trauma in this context is like a very thick piece of ice. It's also contaminated with some metals and very hard materials that are not going to evaporate, and those also pull the water together, so that no matter how vacuous, so to speak, the mind is, it's funny, the rock is still going to stay. And then maybe you need a therapist or relational practices, or to grow up the whole lattice, the whole network of coordination around and inside that clump. Really allow it to start being exposed to the spaciousness of mind. But even for that, it's much better to start with the vacuous mind. I don't know if I like that term. And to let what can freely dissolve and resolve around us to go away, and then only do the surgical strike, only come in with like a surgeon's tool to, right, versus having like a whole self, and I have trauma and I'm coming here like whoa, 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 whoa. This whole process. So in my mind, it's a much more efficient path, and it's all due to skillful views. I want to also use the opportunity to frame what we're doing today as inoculation for you and anyone who's going to be watching this, to really ask yourself the question. This is sort of the premise that I give at the beginning of the book, that reading this book will help you be enlightened from any source. When you receive instructions from some other tradition, from something that might have not even be Buddhist, ask yourself, in terms of the authority, the teacher, the whatever, trying to give me a view to entertain, trying to give me some practice, is this practice going towards the dissolution of conditioning ultimately? Is it meant to let me see my unconscious assumptions and create choice around them? Or is it a view that's trying to manipulate me to be more in alignment with whatever the teacher, the tradition is selling? Seeing our collective minds digesting. That's not to say that there aren't going to be practices or views that you're going to encounter that, let's say, are less skillful in this regard, and they naturally imply that someone has negative intent. What I more so want you to have is the ability to then translate even instructions that are less skillful into this paradigm. So that, for example, if you go do physical yoga and you're getting instruction, and the teacher is operating from a paradigm of some what sometimes would be called polishing the tile, right? Trying to create a perfect mind or a perfect body. You know that even as you're taking the instruction and doing the practice, you're looking for the hidden assumptions. You're looking for the tensions And you want to treat them in the ways that we've been discussing in this chapter in the practice book, where we're not trying to poke at them. We want to create the space for them to exhaust so that we can get into states of less conditioning and so on. So use the views that we are discussing here. Use this understanding to inform all of your path, not just the stuff that I'm talking about or that's in the book. Okay, anything more, or are we ready for some inquiries? Okay, let's do some inquiries. So I want you to think about this for 10, 20 seconds, and then we do popcorn style. And the inquiry is this. What views, what beliefs about life have been installed in us by caretakers, by society? And it can be the simplest thing, right? You have to be a good person. It can be something that's like very culturally embedded, like wow, this is so hard to just like pull out of thin air. But do you have a sense of what I'm pointing to? Try to really think about things that are normally so blind, and to be clear, it doesn't have to be something bad. Some of these are useful in terms of where we are culturally, of where we are with our families, with our relationships. But it's always useful to point them out. It's always useful to bring them to awareness. So take a moment to think and then just jump in with what comes up. Here's one that I have. Growing up in Israel, there's the view that everyone always wants to kill us and we have to protect ourselves. Forever we will live with a sword strapped. Yeah, just jump in.
What I got from both of my parents is that everything you do has to have a logical reason and a logical explanation. And if you are doing something and you can't explain why, then something is wrong with you.
There's these two separate states of being, which is work and free time.
Ooh, I have one. Original sin. We are broken. We have to give ourselves to God, to Jesus Christ, to fix ourselves.
I think most of the 10 Commandments are such a I don't know, conditioning.
Yep. Everyone.
The golden rule.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What about something in relationships? How you're supposed to treat your family members, your loved ones, your friends, your colleagues? Children should be seen, not heard. Boys don't cry.
My parents always used to say in German, but the stronger one gives in. So if you're really the stronger person, you will be the person who can give in. Yeah.
Okay, at least one more. Moshe, Alex, anything? Don't have to, but
I think we grew up to believe that the world is fair. Yes. Some ways there is kind of like a balance between you're going to be good, you're going to receive good, or you expect the other to be good to you, or yeah, some kind of a belief that people grew up with.
I notice a lot of mine are kind of more wordless, like implicit things around the importance of control and how we manage ourselves. Don't really boil down to aphorisms.
How would you boil it down to a sentence? Like the essence of the.
Clean your plate.
Alex, did you have one?
Yeah, it's just like these questions are always very, very difficult for me, but maybe the reason is I grew up in post-Soviet Russia, and very early on I realized that a lot of people around me are very stuck in their views, and I kind of set out, for myself, I decided that you must not like get caught up in cultural views. So I sort of like, I am a person who likes to live outside culture, which, not to be like antisocial, but outside culture, because culture deceives people, and I see it all the time, and it's just like it's painful. So that's kind of a view that is prevalent for me.
Yeah. Culture is not your friend, someone said in the US a few decades ago. Beautiful. It's also a good pointing to the way that I will not have views is also a view.
Yes.
Okay, so once you...
something that came to my mind also after we spoke. The first time when you asked the question was something like some kind of like a social construct in some ways, parents, influences by religion, tradition. Yeah. But now something else came to my mind, and I wonder, mostly from a psychological perspective, as we grew up, I mean, naturally, automatically, and maybe that's inherently, we have needs, we have wants, yes? Mm-hmm. So we grew up, I mean, not even if thinking of it, I want to eat, so people should provide me this food, yes? We grew up to develop layers of layers on top of that, yes? I like that, I don't like that, I want to be loved, I want to be taken care of. And when things like this are not necessarily taking place, we ourselves developing higher stories or narrative to ourselves, even not necessarily from the outside.
Right.
Yeah, that you know what, I'll take care of everything by myself, for example. I'm not going to depend on anyone else. So all these stories, or I'm going to be shy, I'm going to be weak. So I'm just sharing that you develop your own stories and belief systems, and
That's right.
based on some even physiological, biological, natural need, and it's become in some ways given a way of living. And after that, you know, it's become your ideology almost.
Yep.
And it's
right. That this is how it works, and you could draw a similar pyramid this way, where at the foundation you have, I can take care of myself. And then, okay, so this is the profession that I will take, and this is the identity that I will have, and this is how I relate to people, and this is why I need to yell at you right now. Right? And it's all founded on this first piece, often something that happened when you were 2 years old or 5 years old, and it was like, oh, okay, so I have to be this way from now on. That is also a view, right? This is also the type of gunk that we want to have dissolved. Okay, so I want you each to consider the view, one of which we just expressed, that feels the most gripping, that feels the most like, oh, right. It's a view that my parents gave me, that society gave me. It's a view that I really still even believe in many ways, or even believe is true and useful. I want you to find one, and let's take just 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds of silent contemplation about the way that that view has directed your life, how it shaped perception, how it influenced decisions, just for yourself. Take a few more seconds to bring that to a close. And I want to emphasize that we're not trying to destroy all views. We don't want to live in a viewless life, but we want to have conscious choice, or at least the capacity to consciously see what views we're operating on, so that we can choose views that are useful. In many ways, the Ten Commandments that Boris mentioned were the foundation of a whole culture. And that culture, based on those views, was an advancement in our ability to coordinate ourselves. In some sense, the Ten Commandments at the time were the most skillful views available. It's just a matter of seeing when they become stuck and entrenched, when the insight becomes shackles, knowing how to dissolve them. That's the benefit of maintaining higher base of operation. It's much more likely that when something starts becoming a shackle, it will just dissolve. Leave space for something new to arise. Okay, so the next inquiry is, what is a fundamental assumption that you carry about what this path might give you?
Which path are you referring to?
The path that we have all gathered here for, the dharmic path, the path of awakening. And when you have that, open your eyes or give me some other signal that you have something, because we're going to play with it. The first question of inquiry is how in your life you're using that assumption of what you're going to get from the path to suppress arising phenomena, to suppress your experience. You're going to take some time to think about this and come back when you have something. And it's just for you. I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. And with the idea of what you want from this path in mind, the question for you is, how can you give that to yourself right now? If you want to be peaceful, how can you feel more peace right now? If you want to be loving, how can you be more loving right now? If you have some pain or agitation that you want to have resolved, how can you give that the service that it needs right now? And you may notice how just by asking the question, even before doing anything, but certainly also addressing the thing that we are craving in some future, there is a similar sense of the arriving at the present moment that we were playing with pointing out instructions. You notice a greater ease of being here now, some more basing in eternity. It's subtle. It's less intense in our field than it was last week, but maybe you can notice. And it's simply a result of clearing out some of the delusion of, I will go on a path, and in the future, I will then feel some idea. Instead of, wait, I want this, let's give it to myself now, whether in meditation or by just going to do the thing. Or, oh, I want to not have tension. Oh, let's see what's this tension now? What does it say? What does it want? How does this land for you? How does this feel? In some sense, this is the type of view and understanding that I really want you to take from this, because this is the type of assumption that if we practice from without seeing, right? I want to go towards peace. I want to not feel this pain. We will meditate away from, instead of meditating to come into deeper contact with ourselves now.
Something that came to my mind when you said so. Let's say I came to that path or the path of life. I mean, for me, the meaning is, let's say, to feel a greater level of peace. Let's say to be more loving, to have more harmony, to align my internal component. If it's your thoughts, my feelings, my sensations toward that. And I realized that there are different components in our body that have different level of evolutions. Yes, some are more advanced, some are less advanced. So obviously, at any given moment, I'll try to bring my best attitude, more loving to the moment, whatever it is presented to me, more caring, more unity. And in some ways, there is always some kind of discrepancy between different parts.
Yeah.
And so it's almost kind of like trying to settle the being and the becoming, what is in the present moment, or what I aspire to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always, you try to kind of almost like reduce the discrepancy to create a greater level of unity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a working process. And as I evolve, hopefully, that goes down, and that's what I feel. But there always this kind of gap. Yes, that, and you try to think about different kind of, like you said, probably views that harmonize all these elements together.
Yeah. Always there is a cap is a view. What if there was no cap?
What do you mean is there is no cap?
What if there is no limit to how harmonious your system can become?
I personally, I mean, it's a different angle. I mean, I think it's infinite, but because I don't think that we'll be able to reach that point, and that's maybe a philosophical way of the way that I view things.
I don't think I will be able to reach that point.
What's that?
I don't think I will be able to reach that point.
You said I don't think. You don't think.
Is
I
a view.
agree. I agree. That's exactly my perspective.
View is a limiting view.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the idea is, the path itself is to, again, remove, like, to get as closer as possible till you can get to that point. But it's okay. We are on the same path. I mean, for me.
Just notice all of those assumptions.
Yeah.
Notice where they're coming from. Notice the meaning that you're making around them. Notice the assumptions underlying them and what service the story provides to the rest of the system. This is very ripe for inquiry. Of course, you're pointing at something that's useful to discuss on the path, and that we're talking about very much, right? Bringing the system into collectedness, into consensus, into harmony.
Yeah.
Just notice I want you to notice the way that the assumptions, there's also like, this is a struggle, it's difficult. There's a cap that I'm stuck up against. I will never reach, and so on and so forth. Notice them.
It's words, but in some ways, again, like you said, words cannot capture that, because if you say yes or no, it's the opposite. Kind of like when I say there is a cup, I'm looking for a lot of gratitude and appreciation, because I do believe we are human beings with limitations, but it's not from a place of I'm bad. You know, I'm just seeing the reality as is, with gentleness and kindness, and accepting that. So I think it's a different angle. When I say cup, in some ways, it's accepting our limitation where I am and just moving forward as you move along. Now, this is also an assumption, and I can go on and on.
We're a little over time now. Let's save this for our upcoming one-on-one. I want to bring us to a close. So let's see. So of course I want to say this is useful exploration, right? I'm sorry that I have to cut it off, but yeah, we will continue. So I mentioned a few things today that I want you all to take away with you. Really hope they're top of mind. I encourage you to write it down, to consider this going forward, to do whatever you can to take the essence of what's been started to be integrated this session. It's been a lot. Like I'm really seeing the gears of mind running, spinning, taking it in. And I want to say what comes up for me is gratitude and appreciation for the quality of your listening, of your sincere desire to understand this path, and the openness to taking this in, and like really to the wrestling and wanting to integrate, to take in for yourself this understanding of this material. So thank you for that. And the last bit of instruction or imploration that I want to give: anytime you go down to sit, regardless of whatever practice you do, before you do anything, before you start any technique, take a moment to contemplate the intention that you have for this entire path. Take a moment to really consider the practice in the light of this intention. And the intention can be going towards awakening, to your best understanding of what awakening is, or to come into the deepest contact with yourself, which is fundamental awareness, the equivalent of that. Sit even just for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and be with it, so that any practice that you do, whether it's mental yoga where you're constructing, right, or it's a type of emptiness practice, there is an alignment on what your highest understanding of the path and its goals are before you do anything else. It will save you a lot of trouble and misery going forward, and make it much more likely that you're not losing yourself in one of the dead ends of exploration. And it will continue inoculating you against instructions that carry within them seeds of less skillful views. Any final comments before we break off? Okay, I think we're very saturated for today. Thank you all again for coming here. It's so lovely every time. Next week I will be on my first vacation in a year, and the week after I will be on retreat. So we will reassemble, I believe it's the 28th in the document. Let's see, 29th. Yes, 29th of July. 3 weeks. See you next time. Take care.
You.